to Albert. Babu, should I start? Okay, and apologies for Albert, but we'll be happy when he joins us. So, good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see you, and just to say welcome to, I'm sure you've had welcomes, but I haven't spoken to you yet, so I just want to welcome you to beautiful Thailand. We are here for this plenary session on the interplay of enablers. Across the Asian Pacific region, climate risks are accelerating, which I'm sure you've heard for the last few days, from floods and droughts to sea level rise and biodiversity loss. Incremental solutions are no longer enough. What we need are transformational approaches that cut across systems and scales. Such transformation is only possible when enablers, that is policy, governance, finance, science, innovations, and social capital, interact dynamically. Strengthening one can unlock progress in others, but gaps between them can hold us back. So today, this morning, we will explore how these enablers connect and what practical pathways can help us catalyze systemic resilience. It is my absolute honor to moderate this session, and allow me to briefly introduce our speakers and panelists. And apologies for any mispronunciation. I barely know how to pronounce my own name, so it's no disrespect. It's just I'm just very bad at pronouncing people's names. So first we have Dr. Shobak Dakal, professor at the Asian Institute of Technology, coordinating lead author for the IPCC Special Report on Cities. Then we have Mr. Maheshwar Dakal, Joint Secretary, Climate Change Division, Government of Nepal. And then Albert hasn't joined us yet, but we're hoping Albert de la Cruz, Commissioner of Climate Change Commission Philippines, will join us shortly. Then we have Mr. Sewang Dorji, did I say that now? Okay. Senior Climate Change Specialist, Global Environment Facility, also known as Jeff. And then we have Mr. Orgo Roy, Principal Climate Change Specialist, Asian Development Bank, and Ms. Teresa Wong, Head of Science, IPCC Working Group, Technical Support Unit, Dr. Liaquat Ali, Director, Climate Change and Urban Development, BRAC, and Ms. Hannah Shu, Director, Climate Adaptation Corporation Division, Korea Environment Institute. And with that, I invite Dr. Dakal to set the stage. Over to you. Yeah, sure. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Marlene, for your kind introduction, and my sincere gratitude to the organizers for this opportunity to speak in front of you this morning. This morning, please allow me to talk a little bit on systems perspective on enablers. I think Marlene already mentioned that enablers are very important, and the dynamics of enablers are very, very important. So in that context, I intend to just set a stage. We have an excellent set of panelists speaking after me, who will look at the different types of enablers from very deep perspective. So I'm just going to set the scene and try to stay a little bit at the top. So basically, I'm going to talk on three things in next 12 minutes or so. Why focusing on enabler is urgent. I think this is very urgent, we know it, but let me start from that point. And what are the key enablers? And again, colleagues after me are going to represent each different enablers, and they are going to provide more discussion and the specific points, and also how enablers can interplay to either facilitate or to constrain the transformative or transformational adaptation. Now, I think this is one of my favorite figure from IPCC report, which always make a very strong voice in showing the science evidence to the policymakers. IPCC reports, this particular report have shown that, as you can see, that the world has already warmed by 1.1 degree by 2020. And the rate is unprecedented in last few decades. This widely used IPCC figure show how climate has already changed in the climate stripes that you see in different colors, and how it likely to be changed along the lifespan of the three representative generations born in 1950, 1980, and 2020. So what it means is that the future projections here are shown for different greenhouse gas emission scenario, and also it's clear that climate will further change, felt not far future, but already and more aggressively in coming years. So we don't have too much good reason to be too happy. If you look at our emission pathways, you see that we are not doing better. Even if we combine all the unconditional pledge and the zero emission pledges, that might leave us to 1.9 degree, even if we assume that everything is well done. But our track records are not that great, which brings this question of the limit of, I call it incrementalism. It has limits. I think the Merlin also mentioned earlier that incremental solutions are not option anymore. We must do more. That is a reality. And if we follow this continued trend of incrementalism, it might lead into the maladaptation. So the transformation adaptation is must for us. I think since the first day, including IPCC Working Group co-chair Winston also used this slide. This is the IPCC definition of transformational adaptation. I think this has been played several times in last few days. The definition is reasonably clear, and also examples are reasonably clear. What are the examples of incremental adaptation? What are the examples of transformational adaptation? Of course, we talk about the systemic change. For example, building seawall is an incremental adaptation, but the managed coastal retreat or ecosystem-based approach, for example, mangrove ecosystem as a defensive barrier, that could be more transformation. So the transformational adaptation really differs. And also there are lots of such examples which I'm not going to talk more. Now, from the perspective of enablers, the transformative potential of adaptation varies. In IPCC, the depth, the scope, the speed, and limits, these are the different dimensions which are very important for transformative adaptation. I think this has been talked several times. I'll not get into detail, but evidence is quite scarce. The evidence of the transformational adaptation varies by the region. We have seen several strong evidences in North America, Central and South America, and some in Europe, but the evidence of that transformational adaptation remains quite sketchy, which means that we need to do more. Now, of course, this transformational adaptation doesn't happen in vacuum. It requires enablers. And there are lots of those enablers which know them reasonably well, but we don't know them reasonably well in the sense of how they act, how they interplay with each other. Governance and policy frameworks are very, very important enablers. Financial resources and investment are very, very key enablers. Technology and innovation, social capital, stakeholder engagement, knowledge and information systems. These are very important enablers which are needed in order to move towards transformational adaptation, which also means that we have to enable these enablers. And how these enablers work, that is what is our interest to discuss today. There comes a very strong role of the enablers, but we also know that these enablers of adaptation, they interact with each other in a way that it can either cause synergy or it can cause trade-off. Now, when it cause synergy, there many of these enablers interact with each other. One reinforces the other. At the same time, there is a danger if we don't do it properly that one enabler could cause trade-off to others and lead into unsuccessful actions or lead into the maladaptation. So for transformational adaptation, this dynamics is very important. But also, we have a lot of examples of this. But let's make no mistake that there are no silver bullets here. Each situation demands its one unique, specific situation, and it demands the relook into it. So there are synergy and there are trade-off. For example, strong governance funds collaborative platforms that combine scientific local knowledge, and that leads to the community-one solution. As you can see that there are a lot of keywords here, and each of these keywords are enablers. At the same time, when you look at the trade-off, for example, top-down technology imposed without collaboration erodes the community trust and capacity, leading into the failed project. As you can see that in the first part, there's a synergistic effect among the enablers, and they lead into the success. But in second case, they lead into the tensions, and these interdependencies are very, very difficult. And our colleagues speaking after me will address from each of these enablers and provide you much more detailed cases. Look at the case for, let's say, adaptation finance. One very recent study has showed that 84% of the Asia Pacific's annual financial needs are unmet. This is the latest publication from CPI. And unmet financial resources are huge. Now, what can we do? What can we do to these finance-related enablers? Now, financing is a very, very key enabler. It's a fuel for change, and we need a rapid shift from insufficient incremental funding to a large-scale, predictable, and targeted investment. Scaling up is our challenge. Shifting incentives, bringing more private and commercial money, but through different mechanisms, and also targeted financing to make sure that we address the most vulnerable segments. These are very, very important. Now, in order to do that, of course, we have, for example, lots of tools we have been discussing. We have been discussing the blended finance, for example. Blended finance can leverage the private capital, where if we could combine the public money and the philanthropic money to take away some of the risk, then make a space for private actors, then we can leverage more commercial money. Because we saw in earlier slide that almost 84% of our financing needs are unmet. So how to leverage, how to unlock that potential, this large pool of the private money together with the public money is something important for us. Again, the funding for innovation and scalability is very important. Shifting projects from project basis to the more programmatic basis, these are important for us from the financing, and also financing the community level actions. This financing works as very important enabler. But also this financing, for example, interacts with other enablers. Governance and policy frameworks can lead to the financial resources by creating enabling conditions for investment and for allocating more. Similarly, legal environments can spur innovations and stakeholder engagement. Knowledge and innovation empowers stakeholder engagement by providing actionable insights. And also data monitoring systems are very important to make a policy, because it allows policies to be more policy evidence, science evidence-based policies. So as you can see that there are a lot of interdependencies and synergies among these enablers. It's not only synergy, there are trade-offs and challenges. For example, limited funding can constrain capacity building, it can constrain data infrastructure, it can constrain evidence-based, then it at the end hinders the policies. As you can see that funding has also the multiple interlinkages in terms of posing trade-off and challenges. Policy fragmentation, weak governance hinders even getting the funds. So how to position them together is very important. And again, this combination of enablers is what we need to pay lots of attention. So in the interest of time, let me summarize what I said in a couple of bullet points. The first, think systems, not silos, because enablers are needed to be addressed from multiple fronts. If we just overly focus on one enablers, if we try to optimize only one enablers, it might lead into the situation, this is not what we want. So think system, not silos, is very different, very important, even for the enablers. Second, targeting leverage points is very important. Often reforming governance and policy and finance are very important levers to change many other enablers, and it can produce the cascading benefit across the system. So targeting leverage points is very important, and while targeting leverage points, few enablers can play a very instrumental role. Designing enablers is very important. We must design enablers to create the synergies and also to mitigate the trade-off. So we have to ensure that these different enablers work together and not in isolation. Last but not the least, investing in the facilitation. Investing in the facilitation is very important because funding for coordination, facilitation, and especially trust building is very important. Trust building is a cornerstone of the collaboration, and these are the infrastructure for transformation. So if we can ensure these enablers work in unison, creating synergistic effect, addressing the trade-off, then that will lead us into the transformational adaptation because our challenge is huge. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dakal, for framing the critical importance of enabling systems working together. We now are going to turn to our first set of questions that I'm going to pose to our esteemed panelists here on the podium. And the first few questions are going to be around policy, governance, strategic planning, and finance, and to discuss how these enablers can break silos, as Dr. Dakal talked about, think systems, not silos, and create coherence across scales. So my first question is going to go to the second, Mr. Dakal from Nepal. Mr. Dakal, Nepal faces overlapping risks from glacier melting and to floods and landslides cutting across scales. My question is, how is the government of Nepal ensuring coherence between policy, planning, and finance for climate adaptation, particularly when resources flow through multiple funding windows and sectors? What coordination mechanisms are proving effective, and what lessons can Nepal share with other countries seeking transformational adaptation? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for asking very relevant questions, but let me share my experience from the Nepal age. Basically, Nepal formulated a number of policies as a living document, the National Climate Change Policy and National Adaptation Plans, focusing to the food security and agriculture, water resources, forest and biodiversity, tourism, and of course the disaster risk reductions. And basically, in our case, we focus the various segment of the society, as I mentioned, and how do you coordinate each other among the cross-cutting agenda, particularly gender, local communities, as Dr. Dakal highlighted. But the most important part is policies are enough to design and to formulate, but question is how do you implement that? And at the same time, what type of institutional mechanism, basically top-down and bottom-up, or you can say vertical or horizontal coordination mechanisms among the federal government ministries and subnational level ministries and then local level together with the civil society and then private sectors. At the same times, Nepal has taken a couple of initiatives. Simply, we are planning to climate budget tagging systems so that we can track how we are working in the ground and coping the climate change adaptation activities in the ground. At the same times, how do we can mainstreaming the activities together with international support and then local government or the provincial government working together, harmonize among the different funding windows. This is the what we are creating the mechanism, particularly budget tagging systems. What we are planning is at this moment only 6% of the total budget is highly climate relevant. But after next 5 years, we are planning 20% of the total budget planning systems. That means we are going to address through our own budget to address the climate threats in the grounds. Regarding to the coordination mechanisms, we do have a political systems in the central level, the climate change councils led by the prime ministers. But at the same times, we do have a interministerial coordination committee where other sectoral ministries we coordinate so that we can harmonize each other and support, as Dr. Tukal highlighted, regarding to the collaborations, the core value of the climate change adaptations. At the same times, our national planning commissions is coordinated with other sectoral ministries each other so that one ministry can complement the another one. At the same times, we do have a couple of lessons learned from our case that our system is country-led and country ownership approach, what we applied, because the developing NAP and then climate change policy, even NDC, is not for the donor support. It is for mainstreaming of our own budget systems. These are the national climate documents. And budget tagging system, as I already told you, that it is a very important to tracking the funding systems. And at the same time, the another approach what we applied is whole of the society and whole of the government approach, that so that every segment of the society can play their roles as an interplay, or you can say. At the same times, and the most important part is local government. Whatever supports we do, the climate actions, adaptation actions, it should goes to the local levels, and then local government take the ownerships and they can produce more goods and services so that the society can be the more resilient society. Despite the facts, we are also facing some constraints. Of course, we are always speaking about the more predictable, more adequate financing mechanisms, but at the same times, always the finance is inadequate. And even the international finance is really hard to get the access because of the long process and the need more informations. That's why it is highly necessary to simplify the process. And at the same time, the capacity building, both government and communities. For government, writing proposal and accessing the fund and the deliberation of the fund is one part. But at the same time, how do we utilize the fund through the local communities? Because the real translation of the action depend on the capacity of the local communities. And another most important part and the remain constant is coordinate each other. Even within the community, there are so many groups working together, the water user group, forest user group, agriculture user groups, and how do you harmonize them and make coherence among the groups? This is the very important. But finally, my point is Dr. Dhakal highlighted that incremental adaptations inadequate. Let's make incremental, but make it adequate, not inadequate, so that in terms of finance, in terms of capacity buildings, or in terms of technology access, or so and so forth. That's why step by step, gradual process is climate change adaptation is not a rocket science. That's why we have to go to the ground and do together with the people. My final statement is let's work going to the ground, close to people and close to nature, so that we can make the society, the country, and the planet the more climate resilient. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Rakal, for your reflections on what has worked in Nepal and on the importance of not only to work across ministries, but also to align national and local government approaches and a whole society approach. I understand you have a flight to catch and that you will be leaving us, so thank you very much for taking the time to come this morning and to share Nepal's experience in this. So thank you very much. Note that we still have an empty chair. I hope everything is okay with Mr. De La Cruz, and if it's okay with Mr. Dorji from Jeff, can I hand it over to you? And if you can, as we've already heard, that financing adaptation is a major, financing at scale is a major challenge. So my question to you is, given that Jeff manages multiple funding windows, including climate, water, biodiversity, what concrete steps is Jeff taking to coordinate across these windows to minimize overlaps, break down silos, and maximize synergies so that countries can align policy, planning, and finance for transformational outcomes? Is it okay that we jump to you? You ready?
Thank you very much, Marilyn. Good morning, colleagues. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, the organizers, for having us here. So on the question of what is Jeff doing, I want to reflect a little bit on where we're coming from, set up somewhere long time ago to initially serve 3 Rio conventions. Jeff currently manages 6 funds called Jeff, we now call families of funds. And each of these funds actually responds to the implementations of the conventions, such as 3 Rio conventions, as well as Minamata, Stockholm, and very recently BBNJ. And we also are mandated to manage fairly recently established Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, also known as GBFF. I mention this because this 6 funds has got, we kind of look at from the family of funds approach. And this is relevant in the discussions here as Junior Duckle just left, and as mentioned by Senior Dr. Duckle here, I think we are trying to look at the question of trying to sort through a silver bullets, and I don't think we have got one right now. But I can just share you an example of how we as a Jeff have taken an approach in trying to see if we can kind of find a way to at least synergize among many different environmental and climate issues through many different funding windows. One of the first concrete approach that we have taken is we have encouraged countries in the recipient, Jeff recipient countries to pursue the pathway of something called multi-trust fund programming. What that basically means is that you can submit one proposal to various different funds. And this has been quite successful because this has allowed us to be efficiently deliver support in this in the area of trying to address spectrum of environmental problems and be able to strategize and help countries to program appropriately. We have lessons learned on that, and all of these lessons actually convinces us that that's actually one very good way to help countries in trying to break the silos. Second one, which is playing a little bit into a domain of policies and governance framework, is also that we have started something called integrated programs. What that means is that there is a funding available under a Jeff, what we call a mother fund, Jeff Trust Fund. And those monies actually kind of allocated to countries based on certain formulas called star formulas. But you have, as a recipient countries, there's an option for you to be able to just program in independent convention focal area, or you can combine all this together. And that kind of integrate various aspects of the conventions into a particular areas, and we kind of provide incentives for countries to take that up. So these integrated programs, which now, kind of started 3 cycles ago as an pilot approach, and then impact programs, and then it has come up to now at 11 integrated programs. And we have 98 recipient countries doing that. And whole ideas of the integrated program is to see that if that program can tackle multiple problems of various different conventions. And this has actually been very successful in our case. And this is like launching into a next cycle of GEF. We will be retaining a number of these programs based on the lessons and experience that we have gained so far in last 10 to 12 years, honestly. And thirdly, I think more targeted towards countries is that we have provided resources to the countries to be able to come together in their own contexts, coordinated by what we call as operational focal points. That's our point in the country, in very different ministries. So we give them resources. They bring all the people that are relevant to talk about what needs to be done in terms of breaking silos. There's good discussions. We help them to think through the projects and programs and designs and everything else. And this has actually worked very well in terms of bringing many sectors in both government as well as private sectors and financial institutions to be able to bring on the same table to discuss about how to do things, how to break silos, what are the issues that they need to consider. And we have actually broadened that a little bit beyond countries. Now we have gone to something called extended constituencies workshop. Basically what that means is that, for example, in here in this region, we have 2 different constituencies. One is South Asian and one is East Asian. So we kind of bring all these constituencies, countries together, 50, 60 people in a single place. And it's not just the GEF person, it's all the convention focal points and NGOs and youths and all many important stakeholders are invited to talk about it and help them to think through what are the issues. I think this actually plays a little bit on the stakeholder engagement space as well. So my key point is to say that as a financier, you just don't provide money to do independent projects. We kind of outline various different ways to do multi-trust fund projects, options for integrated programming, which is going to be supplement or complement happenings under the multi-trust fund projects. And at the country level, we kind of bring everyone on the single table to talk about it, your issues. I think one of the biggest challenges in my understanding is that we know in each of our hand there are a lot of silos and compartmentalizations and how we can basically draw on the synergies and avoid the trade-offs and stuff like that. But I think it's important for us to provide that space at the country level to think through. Things are not going to be perfect, but starting conversation would actually go a long way. And finally, we are actually in the middle of the process to launch our next cycle, which is starting from, I believe, July 2026. Yes, definitely July 2026. And we have put out a couple of key documentations out there. One is called Programming Direction, which is to look at the entire GEF, the GEF Trust Fund component. And we have also put out something called Climate Change Adaptation Strategy that actually speaks to the 2 other funds that we manage in the GEF. It's called Least Developed Country Fund and Special Climate Change Fund. Those are the 2 funds I think it's relevant here in this discussion directly because those are the funds that supports climate adaptation. And we have put out those documentation out there. I'm actually flying to Botswana next week. That's where we're going to have a good discussion, and hopefully we'll have a good traction on that. Our idea is to continue on the trajectory of the positive momentum that we have built in breaking that silos, and we are hoping that going forward we'll have more multi-trust fund projects that's coming along to be able to address a number of different issues that we are aware about. And that can contribute to the climate change adaptation transformational outcome. I'll stop here with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, and for sharing how Jeff is considering and thinking about how to break down the silence. And to be fair, breaking down silos is hard because as humans, we like to categorize and think in boxes and compartmentalize. So breaking down silos is not something that usually comes to us naturally, even though it's in our interest to break down the silos. Okay, I understand that Mr. De La Cruz is on his way, so we look forward to hearing the Philippines' perspective on this. But in the meantime, if ADB is ready, I will turn to Mr. Roy. And, ADB's financing choices are highly influential in the Asian Pacific region. And I wanted to ask you, what does transformational financing look like for ADB? And how is it helping to connect enablers such as science, innovation, governance within its funded programs?
Thank you, Marlene, and thanks for inviting us for this panel. If we go by the most conservative estimates, we have seen that this region requires at least 100 billion per year for adaptation. Our financing for the past few years have been 4 billion a year for adaptation. So we're very small compared to what the needs are, right? So in that context, if we really want to focus on transformational financing, I think as an institution, it's important for us to ask the question, number one, where is our money going? Number two, how is the money being programmed? And number three, what outcomes are the money achieving, right? 3 basic questions. And I have to be upfront in saying, I think we have made kind of progress in the first 2 questions, not necessarily so much on the third one around outcomes. So the first one, a question on where is our adaptation financing going? I think we have made significant progress both on the side of ensuring a large portion of our adaptation financing in the form of grant financing is going to the most vulnerable member countries of ours. So under our Asian Development Fund, we have established a dedicated window that provides additional grant financing largely to LDCs and SIDS, but for investments that have a dedicated purpose of adaptation. So for example, $15 million grant going to Marshall Islands for coastal resilience, or as Mr. Dekal was saying, $20 million grant going to Nepal's western provinces to help women deal with impacts of climate risk. So that's the one on focusing on equity, very targeted interventions. But the second way of also showing that where is our money going is about how can we use our money strategically to unlock reforms in the countries for them to mobilize further financing. So we use a lot of policy-based financing mechanisms. For example, in Bangladesh, we are working with Bangladesh Bank for the Bangladesh Bank to ensure all their clients are adopting climate disclosure policies so that that's kind of aligned with the financial flows resilience. So that's on where the money is going. The second one is on how the money is programming. This is quite tricky. It's not so easy because we know that adaptation requires much longer term financing and predictable financing. While our financing is predictable, so every member country knows annually how much money they receive, but longer term programming is not so easy to actually operationalize. We also work in the cycle of 4 years, 5 years programming cycle, not beyond that. So we're looking at how can we address that issue, and I think this is where enablers like access to information, science, data becomes very important, because as countries outline their long-term vision and hopefully backed by strong indicators coming from Global Goal on Adaptation, then we should be able to program our money against those long-term indicators and say, okay, let's program for 20 years and work backwards in 5-year cycle kind of thing. That's possible. And the second part is making sure that money for adaptation is not a one-off investment, because one has to continuously adapt. So how do you then work with national and local institutions and strengthen those institutions so that ultimately they are able to ensure, even once your project is over, the continuous adaptation happens? So we are using a lot of our results-based financing mechanisms essentially to allow strengthening of institutional capacity to do this happen. And lastly, for me, the area that we have made the least progress is what is our money achieving, the outcome side of it. And I really hope the work on GGA work, as well as last year, all the MDBs have come together, and they have first time we have launched a common results framework for climate, both mitigation and adaptation, will help us see largely from an outcome lens and not just from an input financing lens. I think that will be very important to shift the narrative towards long-term support for adaptation. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And wow, what timing, because now we have Mr. De La Cruz. Thank you for joining us. And I'm so sorry about, yeah, I hope you're okay. And one of the first things I learned when I moved to Thailand was to give directions, because it can be a little bit tricky getting around in this very big city of ours. Should I give you the chance to catch a breath, or should I pose you a question? Do you want me to go to the next?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay. Let's give him a chance to land, collect your thoughts, and if it's okay, I will go on to Ms. Wong. Is that okay? And science is a central part to adaptation, yet often remains siloed. So my question to you is, how can science be made more actionable for governments and communities in Asia Pacific, especially under conditions of uncertainty? Given the challenges of projecting future risks, what are the minimum evidence thresholds needed to convince policymakers and financiers to sustain investment in transformational adaptation?
Thank you so much. I guess my quick response is you guys tell us what would convince you to make particular investments or persuade decision makers to make those investments. But I just wanted to pick up on what Dr. Rai was saying about the big gap on outcomes, right? I think that's what the whole adaptation community is struggling with, and how much, to what extent our actions have been effective in achieving the things that we value as the outcomes of adaptation. And I think this is one way that science is also gearing up and has been struggling to find, because I think, as Dr. Shobhakar has sort of established in the beginning, one of the biggest gaps or areas that we still need a lot of information on is effectiveness. And I think this is why the 7th assessment report is ramping up content on adaptation. We have now like 2 big chapters looking at progress on adaptation. That's chapter 3, and then chapter 4, looking at some of these solutions and how and where they work. So I think that is the IPCC is also a report that is a reflection of of adaptation priorities and the community. So we're not really ever been in a silo in a sense, because I think the science is as good as all the data information that is amassed at that point of assessment, right? So and adaptation is a very particular thing. I mean, we somewhat come from a tradition of sort of development work, right? Development impacts and all that work, and in a sense we're similar, because a lot of that work happens in the field, on the ground. And then comes up as knowledge that we know about the conditions of how things work well, and all that. But so I think in a sense the IPCC isn't a group of 800 people working in a room and then announcing the results of something. But I think it's really dependent on the things that come up from implementation. I think this is the biggest opportunity from now to the close of data collection for AR7 is what if all the attempts, I think, from Jeff, from the MDBs to collect data from evaluation, from about the findings, and try to bring up some of these patterns in what has been working and where investment has achieved outcomes and some of the best practices. So I think making science more actionable is, I think, the vision of the co-chairs, and you met Winston on day 1, and also Bart van den Herk from the Netherlands, the other co-chair of Working Group 2, is really one of the things that we are really trying to work towards. I think it's also bringing people together in a way that achieves that, right? So we head into some of these milestones that you hear about. We're going into the first lead author meeting in December, where we bring together 240 authors of the seventh assessment. We have an unprecedented number of practitioners in this cycle because of this very understanding and desire to have this science become more actionable. So it is bringing information from the projects, that programmatic sort of angle that partners here can bring, but also then structurally bringing that into the assessment and saying, how can we structure the content so that people can recognize something that we can pick up and use in implementation, in decision making through all the scales. So I think science can help in supporting prioritization. Science can help in a better understanding of risks and impacts as that continues to be updated. I think the biggest convincing factor these days, or we can debate this because it's not just me understanding what that is, but it's also the cost of inaction, right? I think that's in our scoping meeting of the outline for the seventh assessment. There were a lot of people who said country decision makers continue to ask us about how to calculate or measure the cost of inaction and action. And I think we also have a special product attached to this assessment cycle, which is the technical guidelines for assessing impacts and adaptations. And that also gives us the opportunity to not only sort of collect the best understanding of what a guideline could look like, but also to go what works under what conditions. So I think this really data needs to come from all of us in the room. I think we need to publish our data. We need to validate this data. It's really, the seventh assessment is really dependent on what comes out from this community. And I think I also am very gratified I'm talking to the Asia Pacific community, because I think there are data gaps in this region. It is not a region where a lot of this data comes to the surface. I've been in implementation, so I know the project cycle is such a rush. You get the stuff down and and you don't really sort of think about it, and you have to really make an effort to harvest and harness that. So I think, just ending with Dr. Shobakar's call for also investment in that coordination of data might be a really interesting thing to do. There are a couple of initiatives. GAMI, for example, the Global Adaptation Mapping Initiative, is just one that came out of the sixth assessment by researchers in adaptation who think, I don't understand. I mean, we're trying to amass this data, but it's so hard to put these pieces together. So I think that initiative is running through from AR6 to AR7. It's ongoing right now. We're actually beginning some of the processes of mapping the system of what the adaptation planning and work does. This needs to be a continuous process, not something like, okay, it's time to write the next report and then let's start looking at what we have, but it's a continuous process. So I think if we can also, funders or people who invest in this can also invest in that continuous long-term process of making sense of the information, that would be really great. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wong. I heard publish, validate, harvest, and coordinate the data, and also investing in long-term, and that it's not just a one-off thing. Mr. De La Cruz,
Yes.
how are you feeling?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the Philippines has been mainstreaming adaptation into planning at multiple levels. So my question to you is, how is Climate Change Commission embedding transformational adaptation principles into national development and investment planning? In practice, how is the Commission convening actors across government, private sector, and civil society to strengthen cooperation and realize synergies between sectors such as infrastructure, food systems, health, and ecosystems?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Madam. First and foremost, we adopt a national framework of whole of government approach, wherein we adopted the National Adaptation Plan based on consultative democratic type of planning, the National Adaptation Plan. from the vulnerable sectors, the youth, the women sectors, indigenous. We have a lot of indigenous people. We're more than 7,700 island, up to our local government units, to the village community level. Having said that, we know that we have a deep dive on the science with regards to that, the National Adaptation Plan. But what we are trying to do, at the heart of it, at the nexus of it, is how to laymanize it. Laymanizing climate language is one of the challenges that we have to hurdle, not only on the local level, but on the global level, in order for the information to be cascaded on the ground. Adaptation plans should become part of each and every household. It's not only the business of governance, policymaker, but for us, I feel that if each and every family in the Philippines, if it's every individual in my country, will be able to understand it by means of simplification of issue. We have to simplify the issue. Number one issue is we only have one life, we only have one planet, therefore we should only have one plan. That is not to breach 2 degrees. If we breach 2 degrees, it is catastrophic as provided by the 6th cycle report. How to laymanize it? We need to have a what we call personal approach. Because as we speak, we always talk of climate change. It is a whole of global problem, a national problem, a whole of nation problem, which requires a whole of global and nation solutions. So if that will be the approach always, then they will feel, well, it is a global problem, let the global leader decide on it, act upon it. It's a national problem, let the national leaders act upon it. We're saying that this is a personal problem. This is a family problem. Why? Because we're talking about your life, we're talking about your family house, you're talking about your livelihood, we're talking about your water, about your food, about your children and your children's children. Simplification of issue, laymanize it, make it simple, practical, something that can be touched, something that can be filled by the family, cascading it, the information on the community level, the way it is being understood by the so-called man on the street. That is the best way for me, to my thoughts, the best way for us, for our people to adapt is a very massive, impactful information that can be cascaded to everybody. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very, very much. Which leads very nicely then into Mr. Ali's intervention, which is going to be community-based. But thank you for stressing it, that it's not just a global problem or a regional or national, it's also us, that's the individual that needs to understand and to also take action. Dr. Ali, BRAC's work has shown the power of community-led adaptation. In what ways can grassroots and community-led initiatives shape governance and financing priorities? How can marginalized voices, women, youth, indigenous people, older persons, be amplified to ensure inclusivity in adaptation decision-making?
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In Bangladesh, so we are facing some of the most climatic events like heavy rainfall, erratic rainfall, and very recently added lightning and thunderstorm, cyclone, flood, fog, salinity. In 2024, 72 years record of heat wave is in Bangladesh. So as you said, BRAC is a huge organization, and it is in the DNA of the BRAC to working with the community and including all the people of the society. Our founder, Sarfazle Ahsan Abed, used to say, small is beautiful, but scale is very, very essential. So always we keep eye on ecological balance and social equity. BRAC's adaptation framework includes critical services, climate adaptive livelihoods and reskilling, and risk reduction and local level planning, and preparing the vulnerable cities. So, as I said, the climatic event, if you rank, the entire sector will be affected definitely. But if you rank, you can see agriculture, food security will be the first, and then water security, health, and ultimately people's forced to displaced. What we do, we try to concentrate our effort in some of the most critical vulnerable hotspots. In coastal zone, due to sea level rise, if you visit in the coast of Bangladesh, you can see water everywhere. But to drink a single drop is not there because these are all saline water. According to WHO, less than 0.5 gram per day people can take. But current situation, people are taking 16 gram per day. So these are the critical situations. So what we do actually, we choose a particular upojala to make our efforts so that if we can make a particular upojala free from saline water, that would be a good model for replications. So we come up with the 3 levels of interventions. It's household level, community level, and institutional level. These are all rainwater-based harvesting. And the problem is with the quantity and quality. Both of them are overcome because of big plug food-graded plastic tanks and also very low-cost filtration system. So that models has some social capital component in it. Community-led interventions from management committees that ensures fair water access and contribute to its maintenance. Local governments recognize these community-led models and they integrate that into their local planning as well as with the departments. From the very beginning, we try to mobilize peoples in the name of climate action group, and we capacitate them so that they can raise their voice and they can work with the policy level peoples, like member of parliament, district administrations, and all the stakeholders there. By engaging policymakers directly, they build trust and accountability between the grassroots citizens and political leaders. As I say, the food and agriculture is the main sector going to be affected because of climate change. So when people get sick, they go to the clinic. So we thought in the coastal zone or in some vulnerable our agriculture is become sick now. So we come up with a model called Adaptation Clinic. So it has 4 pillars. And first of all, we make a vulnerability assessment. Based on that, we give some input service and also financial service and advisory service and health and weather and climate information in the language of their people, local people, so that they can do some action in the ground, capacity building and hands-on coaching. And the social capital for that adaptation clinic model is farmers group mobilizations. Farmers learn from each other, share skills, and build trust by working together. Mobile adaptation clinic, a common space where people mix local knowledge with new ideas, strengthen cooperation, and shared learning. Advisory committee, bring together local leaders and stakeholders, creating collective decision-making and accountability. Community seed banks, resource sharing, and cooperation, ensuring fair access to climate-resilient seeds. Community storage, this is the very common after harvesting, there are huge amount of loss. Joint responsibility for protecting harvest, reinforcing solidarity and mutual support. And finance, BRAC, they have their own resources, gaining from the microfinance program as well as from some enterprise. BRAC has its own enterprise and make a partnership, we call it strategic partnership arrangement with DFAT and Global Efforts Canada and BRAC itself. Through that, we try to implement at the local level. And we always like to work with the government, not in silo. So we always try to follow and match our work with the policy plan of the governments and also with the global. and some bilateral partners also with us and private sector. And very recently, by considering the current financial situation, we are thinking of blended financing. One good example, like we normally NGO don't take credit from others, but this time we take credit from ITCOL company and making solar rooftop projects, 80% from credit from ITCOL and 20% from BRAC's own financing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ali, for sharing examples on how community-led initiatives can ensure equity and inclusiveness. We're moving on to innovation and technology. Ms. Chu, technology offers a lot of positive potential, but could you speak to us a little bit about the risks, and also how can Asia Pacific lead in how can Asia Pacific lead in piloting transformational technologies while ensuring they remain accessible and equitable? So if you could, risks and how we can lead in this. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you for good question. I am Hane Cho from Korea Adaptation Center for Climate Change at Korea Environment Institute. And it is very honored to be with you. Actually, Korea has technology development in many fields, including climate prediction, early warning system, and water source management, and smart agriculture, and more. Someday I would like to introduce a lot of Korean climate change response with technology. But today, to fit our topic, I would like to share with you several risks of maladaptation that can occur when technology is not combined with consideration of governance and social capital, drawing on some examples from Korea. First, it is risk of deepening inequality. In Korea, advanced technologies such as AI forecasting and satellite-based early warning system are generally available. However, compared to urban area, rural community, island region, and low-income groups are still lacking. Because infrastructure is lacking, the cost of service is burdensome, and information about how to use these technologies often insufficient. For example, in wealthier neighborhood, AI-driven cooling system help residents cope with extreme heat. But in low-income district, people are still exposed to the same heat wave. AI-based real-time alert mobile platform are established in Korea, but older adults and low-income citizens with limited access to smartphone or the AI information are excluded. Smart irrigation and AI crop recommendation system are being introduced, but small-scale farmer and elder farmer face financial barrier to use them. Migrant worker too, they cannot benefit if warning messages are not deliverable in the right language or cultural contents. Ultimately, the gap in access to technology became a gap in climate resilience. This widened what we may call climate inequality. Second, it is risk of weakening local autonomy and imbalance between regions. Currently, the data-driven decision-making system using AI technology has been developed by the central government. And all the information is depending on the central government. If prompt information is not delivered, the damage to climate change in the region can increase. If a community relies solely on external development technology, they may lose the capacity to strengthen their own adaptive skills. There is also a problem of regional imbalance. A rich community has its own information system, but the others, kinds of low community, that they don't have its own information system. We also need to think about this imbalance. Third, it is risk of overlooking fundamental issues. Technology alone cannot solve those core challenges of adaptation. For example, appropriate land use, forest and biodiversity conservation, and preservation of cultural heritage, these are all crucial aspects of resilience that no AI system can solve on its own. Without attention to these fundamental issues, technical solution will remain incomplete. Fourth, it is risk of the lots of energy and resource needed to develop technology. Data center consume a lot of resource, not only for power, but also for cooling. The process of mining rare metal also impacts local community due to environment damage. When the equipment run out of the life, electronic waste is also generally. It is not an adaptation issue, but a fire broke out at the National Information Resource Agency on the 1 week ago in Korea. It is one of the key national data centers that have and manage government computer system server and database on the large scale. It was because of the explosion of lithium battery, and about 600 government service were paralyzed 1 week ago. So far, about 20% have been recovered and permanent data loss is expected. Many efficient things have been done through innovation and in technology, but this sudden event has been lead Korea into the great chaos. Technology is indeed a powerful tool, but without governance and the equity, that very tool that become a driver of inequality and vulnerability. It can lead us toward maladaptation. Therefore, we must not stop simply introducing new technology. We need to ask who has access, who is involved in the decision making, and how are local tradition and community wisdom being integrated into the process. So I would write some suggestion, my opinion. First, inclusive participation is required. From the very beginning, residents, local government, women, farmers, and vulnerable groups must be part of the decision process. We need to listen carefully what are their circumstances, what do they need, and the success should not be measured only by whether the technologies function, but by who actually benefit across gender, age, and income groups. Second, we need to strengthen our local capacity and seek sustainable financing. Community must be empowered to preserve their unique culture and adapt technology that fit their characteristics. At the same time, we must ensure that these efforts are sustainable. Rather than relying only on short-term project grant, we need to blended financing models that combine local budget, insurance scheme, and public funds and public-private partnerships. Third, we need to consider fundamental challenges. There are limits to what AI and technology can solve. Expanding green space, protecting traditional seeds that smart agriculture cannot replace, and investing in education and awareness are equally important. This deeper issue must not be neglected. Technical innovation great help to improve prediction, response, and efficiency in adaptation to the climate risk. But social inequality, political conflict, cultural and psychological shock, and irreversible change in ecosystem cannot be solved by technical alone. The Asia-Pacific is not only on the front line of the climate risk, it is also the front line of innovation. Technology will bring true resilience only when it is combined with inclusive governance, strong community engagement, and social trust. If you commit to inclusive design, sustainable governance, and financing, and equity-based evaluation, the Asia Pacific can present to the world models of inclusive and climate resilience innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Chu. Okay, we are running behind time a little bit. So for this next, we're going to do a little bit of a rapid fire wrap up for each panelist. And I ask that you keep it to one sentence, and not a long sentence, but a short sentence. So what is the one change you would like to see in your enabler to support transformational adaptation, and who should bring this change? Who would like to start? Yeah, go. One sentence.
Despite the fact that we want all stakeholders, but I'd say that the policy frameworks and the financing, these are the very important levers to really push for change. Of course, they need to bring a whole other enablers together.
Thank you. I think that was one sentence. I wasn't keeping track of the commas. Mr. De La Cruz.
Bold political will. As we speak, the whole world is spending around $3 trillion a year for defense expenditure. If the same will be copied and appropriated the way we appropriate for defense expenditure, if we appropriate for climate adaptations, we don't have any problem at all.
Thank you. Mr. Dorje.
Policy coherence. That's it.
I don't even think that was a sentence.
That's it. Just bring all policies on the same place.
Mr. Roy.
Not just focus on quantity, but more on quality of finance that's guided by science, delivered through strong government systems, and unlocks opportunities through private sector.
Thank you. Ms. Swan.
Knowledge from the implementation of adaptation becomes a source of credible, actionable science and data for assessment.
Thank you. Dr. Lee. Ali. Dr. Ali.
As I said at the beginning, a pilot and a small is always beautiful and easy to handle. Now it's time, we think we should go for scaling. For that, everybody involved need to work together.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Ms. Chu.
Harmony and cooperation of each enablers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I'd now like to, we still have time, which I'm very grateful for, because I'd like to open it up to the floor for questions and reflection from all of you. But given that we only have about 15 minutes left and we want to give a vote of thanks and all of these things, I ask that you keep your question or your reflection very short and raise your hand, I guess. Yeah, raise your hand. Well, I see a gentleman up here. And please tell us who you are and
thank you, every
keep it brief.
panelist. I am really happy to see my teacher, Professor Dakal from, he taught me at AIT. Okay, thank you very much for a very thought-provoking presentation today. I would like to ask a question, very little question, like this small question to Hana Cho. I am Koike graduate, so I know the expansion of the technological development in South Korea. It is at par with the global advancement. But what is the main reason to integrate the local people in regard to the access to information regarding climate adaptation, the climate change scenario? The technology, you are very sound. What is the myth and reality behind it? Could you please explain?
You mean it is very hard question to me. Let me think about it and then I will talk to you later. Okay?
What we can do, we can take a couple more questions and give you a chance to think about it a little bit.
Let me give you time to think about it.
That's totally fine. I see a hand in the back over there.
Thank you. Good morning, Marlene. My name is Fumi Balogun. I'm the UN Resident Coordinator from Timor-Leste. I want to ask around financing. How can countries with very underdeveloped private sector unlock additional financing for climate change adaptation? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Resident Coordinator. I see another woman in the back over there.
Hi, my name is Renuka. I am a lawyer and researcher from India. The question is open to anyone who wants to answer. So there was a lot of conversation in the past week about policy and financing and leadership. But I want to ask, how are we integrating accountability in all of these aspects? And how do you see accountability in climate adaptation?
Great question. So on the first question on financing and private sector, Mr. Roy, do you want to jump in?
Sure,
And maybe
I'm happy
Jeff
to. I'm happy to
that?
start. My colleagues can. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not so always easy to mobilize private financing for adaptation, specifically in small, fragile countries. But I think we need to unpack the question in two parts. One is we want private sector, whether large or small, to themselves adapt because their own businesses are at risk, right? So that's about their internal, how they adapt, how they adapt their policies, disclosures, risk assessments, and looking at entire business continuity plans, etc. That's one bit of it. And the second bit of it is where are the opportunities, the potential opportunities to seek private sector financing for adaptation. And this kind of varies from country to country, but also the sector that you're working in, or also where you want the money to go. So, for example, I think there are many opportunities in the agri space, in the agribusiness space, to look at private sector financing for adaptations. In Timor-Leste's context, coffee is a growing agroforestry product, and there are opportunities to see then how you can bring in the private sector. Or in countries where we have active microfinance institutions, they can look at how can we ensure private sector financing is coming towards products and services that require the needs of the most vulnerable population. So I think it's a combination of both how private sector themselves adapt and where opportunities arises to attract private financing for adaptation. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. De La Cruz, you wanted to come in?
Yes, so we welcome blended financing, so to speak, of course, from the private sector. We have to look into also the principle of which is under the MOIs or the means of implementation, it should be the first world country under the Paris Agreement to be at the forefront of this financing. And as we very well know, only 10% of the numbers of countries that we have emits more than 70% of the GHG emissions that we have, which is the main root of the problem. And that is why we have to focus on it. We don't need to lose the focus. It has to be done that way. They have to decarbonize. At the same time, they need to provide the necessary financing for mitigations and adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you very much. On the question of how do we mobilize private sector finance in the context of the countries that has got not kind of structured market, we would encourage actually from where we stand, we would encourage countries to be able to take advantage of this grant funding being made available. For example, Jeff provides grant support. And one way to deploy that would be to use this grant to be able to de-risk private sector in, that's probably a best way to access capital market. And we have actually done a lot of work on that area. There are separate instruments being developed called non-grant instrument, which is to say that the grant that we kind of the money that Jeff provides is being combined with private sector in terms of taking the fast loss and various other financial products being developed based on that. But I understand in the context of the a country that does not have a lot of capacity, probably there needs to have a good support, technical assistance support in kind of building up the, for example, if this is a national bank, you probably need TA support in making sure that the credit officers are aware about how to manage this climate as a part of the risks, and all this decision-making process needs to be inbuilt. And I think that's where the globally available grant money can come and help. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Dakal, you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, I think I'll make a very small point that in order to make adaptation financing, especially from the context of the private sector, it's very hard, right? Bringing private sector money into the adaptation is not very easy, unlike the mitigation sector, because there are lots of societal good involved here. But I think there is room to work between philanthropic organizations, public institutions, and then private institutions, where I think colleagues said that de-risking some of the risk facilitating role, and then the private sector can come in. And in few sectors, I think our colleague from ADB mentioned that things like agriculture sector, and there are a couple of sectors where commercially viable adaptation financing can happen. But I think our problem is a difficulty to structure climate finance in a way that the de-risking can working across the different actors.
Thank you very much. And before I wrap up, I'd also like to hear from the panel about accountability, a response to the question around accountability. Who would like to take a stab at that? Do you want? Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
I think in our system, I think accountability is built within the project cycle. So there is a strong monitoring and evaluation being put in, and part of that process is to make sure that the intent of the money is to achieve that particular objectives, and this is being continuously being accounted for. But the question really is accountability for whom, right? I mean, if you're kind of looking at the local communities, we really encourage everyone in the local area to be really empowered to take up the projects and design of the projects and planning of the projects, not as a recipient of the project support, but basically empowered to the level that they are accountable in designing and also in implementation, and whoever is executing needs to be accountable as well. So I think all these are being captured in the process of the project development and executions. Thanks.
Just briefly, so I think we have been advocating very strongly that adaptation finance should strengthen government systems that allows meaningful participation of local communities, local governments, and decision-making processes. And if these systems are strong enough and the participation is really meaningful, and as a colleague was saying, you have the agency to decide where the money should be going in, then that will help contribute towards accountability of financing. And at accountability at a downward, not just accountability upward towards the financiers. I think that's very important. Thanks.
Okay, and this means that we are wrapping up right on time. I'm so happy. So, but before I hand it over for the vote of thanks, I would like to thank all of you for this very rich exchange. We've received a lot of information, a lot of good inputs, and in my view, the message is clear. No single enabler can deliver transformational adaptation on its own. It's only through their interplay, policy with finance, science with governance, innovation with social capital, that systemic resilience becomes possible. So with that, it's now my pleasure to hand it over to Mr. Yukihiro Hassan, the Director, Climate Change Science and Adaptation Office, Ministry of the Environment of Japan, for the vote of thanks.
Well, thank you very much. My job is to thank you all, especially our moderator, Marine. Your moderation was perfect. It is very rare to see in this format this session interactive discussion between the panelists, and the questions are well taken and answered by the panelists. This is really impressive, and thank you very much. And Dr. Shobhakar Dakal, thank you very much for your inspiring presentation. Your valuable insights laid a very strong foundation for today's discussion and have provided us with much to reflect upon. I also extend my sincere appreciation to our distinguished panelists for sharing your expertise and knowledge. Your contributions have been incredibly informative, offering us new perspectives and ideas. The theme of this plenary session, of course, interplay of enablers, was both timely and critical. It invited us to give thoughts about the potential of transformational adaptation by examining how strengthening one enabler can unlock cascading benefits across others. One of the key points highlighted during our discussion was the critical role of finance. As many of you are well aware, financing adaptation at scale remains one of the most pressing and persistent challenges in the world. We recognize not only the gap between needs and available resources, but also the access gap still remain, and addressing them requires both innovation and collaboration. As was highlighted in the session, the private sector can play a significant role in adaptation. Japan, with its long history of confronting natural disasters, knows well that the private sector, in particular, offers a broad range of technologies and services and financial solutions. Therefore, public-private partnership is a very powerful approach, driving technological innovation, enhancing scalability, and ensuring financial sustainability. If I may pick up some of the inspiring words and make one sentence from what the distinguished panelists said today, I would say, why don't we invest in facilitation with data and science reflecting our project's implementation as well to achieve multiple impact on the ground and to realize domino effects of enablers so that we can make the individuals, the societies, countries, and the planet more resilient. So thank you very much, and thank you for the active participation. Thank you thank you so much.
All right, that's it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. If you don't mind to just stay, I'm inviting the cameraman. If you come forward for a group photo, I will really appreciate that. So please. Also, while they're joining for the group photo, I would like to request all the participants to join the closing plenary, which is going to happen here. It is not going to be only presenting the summary, but there will be music. So please don't miss that. And the partners who are organized the technical session as of yesterday, please send your inputs as soon as possible. And the partners who will be organizing the technical session after the morning coffee break and after lunch, if you kindly send your input as soon as your session is over, which will help us to capture your inputs in the final summary. Thank you so much. Thank you. Please enjoy the coffee outside the room, the morning coffee. And this is what you have already seen, what we have captured through our the technical team, Tofu Creative. So we'll be showing this as well, probably some of this, probably not all, but it is going to be part of our final report too. Thank you, thank you. Enjoy your coffee and looking forward to seeing you all in the closing session. Now?